How's it going?
Good. So let's see. How many weeks has it been since the election now?
It's been almost a month because it was on the 8th and today is the 7th.
Yeah.
So pretty much a month.
So do you still hear a lot of consternation from people about it, or has it died down a little bit now?
Hey, should we introduce ourselves
Oh,
first?
sure. Let's do that.
Who are you?
I'm Heidi, Dr. Heidi Petak, and I live in the Nashville area. I'm a communication professor at a college and here with my good friend from high school. Let's see, we've been friends for what, 30 years?
That's right. Something like that. Yeah. And you're a red stater, I believe, and
Yeah, right. I am that. I'm a red stater. I'm a conservative Christian, church going, live in the Bible Belt. Yep. How about
and I am your bleeding heart liberal friend from Seattle who votes blue pretty much all the way and doesn't go to church, identifies as a non-theist, and
wait, a non-theist?
a non-theist, yes.
I had thought before you had said you were a not-theist, like
A
I
non-theist.
was like, and that is a new term I've never heard. Non-theist either.
Yes, non-theist.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just spell it in.
And yeah, so that's who we are. And we've been talking weekly since the election. And yeah, there is still a lot of agitation. I would say it's out of the triage mode, but people are still pretty reactive, I should say, to reports of hate crime and because it's interesting, even here in Seattle where everybody's supposed to be Democratic, there have been some disturbing incidences of confrontation where people, like there was a man at a bank that they reported on who, when he was frustrated at the brown skin teller, basically told her, "You need to go back to where you came from."
No.
Yeah. And an electrician in the area who saw a group of African American boys yelled at them, "You N-word kids, get out of here." And so it's, yeah, in our neck of the woods, we attribute this to the election of Donald Trump and all the hate that has accompanied that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I understand.
And how's the mood in your part of the country?
Honestly, I don't hear a whole lot about it anymore. People, by the way, I have a cat on my lap, so if you hear like purring, there he is right here. Purring, or you see a paw reach up to touch me.
Well, no.
You what it is. So what I do hear is I hear hope. I hear people still hopeful about what this administration could mean, and people still hopeful, especially given the concerns that I've had in voting in a man who definitely has some impulsive characteristics and can be a real jerk. I've just wondered, golly, like with foreign policy and all of that, is he going to be able to be a diplomat? And so we've talked about that a lot in my community, and hopeful that with people surrounding him to say, what does diplomacy look like? And these are the things that you need to temper. I think hopeful in seeing him back down from some of the extreme things that he's said in the past, and that's hopeful to me. and hopeful as he brings in some other good people around him that it could mean good things for this administration. So there's a lot of hope for sure. But for the most part, I mean, we've got Christmas coming up in a couple weeks, and now everybody's kind of into the flurry of Christmas,
right.
the election.
Yeah, and
thing that it's not the first thing that we talk about now.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to when we voted in Obama. It was like, because we were on the winning side, it was sort of like, okay, now let's move on to other things.
Right.
So, I mean, I could see how that's probably what's going on too. It's like, okay, our guy won, so let's move on and keep fingers crossed.
Right.
Yeah. We had an interesting correspondence in the last week that's sort of guiding our topic today.
Yeah, so that was interesting. I had been writing, just recapping a little bit for people what this journey has been and kind of the stages of this journey. And I skipped over. I said that I had posted a blog, and that night that I had received a private message from you, which is the message about us hosting some events to help people learn to connect from their hearts. And I skipped over the part where you and I had a bit of dialogue on my Facebook page.
Right. And I pointed that out, and I was like, hey, what about that heart-centered interaction we had? And and then
and you know, okay, so my personality type, like I have my communication model, which I really want to post at some point so people can see it, but it one of the communication styles that's out of fear is a turtle, and the turtle hides their head, and they're not going to tell you what they're thinking because they don't want to offend. So they're just so afraid of conflict and so afraid of offending, and they just want to keep that relationship together and be accepted, that they don't say what they're really thinking and feeling. So my gut instinct was oh yeah, well, if Kelly believes that that's what that was and that's what it looked like, then I can write it that way. But then as I started to process that, I thought, I mean, isn't this whole thing about coming to the table wholehearted with all of ourselves, with all of our emotions, and isn't it about the scariness of showing you who I really am and what I'm really feeling and what I'm really thinking? Because we can't connect from a heart place if I don't show you my heart. So I wrote you a long email and said, this is really scary for me, but I'm going to tell you what I actually was feeling when I read your post on my page. And I was feeling that I misread that you were trying to write from a heart-centered place. And I saw it as your attempt to decimate me publicly. And when I think back to when I first read your post, I felt sick. I mean, all the spit left my mouth, and I was like, oh my goodness, like right in front of everybody, she is going to fight with me about this and take my everything I had written point by point and try to refute it. Like, how do I respond to that? I didn't even know. But for you though, you say that this was coming from a heart-centered place. So help me understand how your heart-centered place, how you ended up writing this from a heart-centered place. Help me understand that.
Well, I want to back it up just a little bit and, just acknowledge that, you're sharing with me that you actually had a different experience, and that it was one of feeling like I was directly attacking you. And so I feel it's important to for me to acknowledge that and try on that perspective from your point of view. And, I can understand how you would see it that way.
Thanks.
Yeah. especially like on your post, I was the one person who did that. All the people who commented, and I don't know how many shares of that post you have now or your link, but I saw all of these comments of, oh, this is exactly what I feel. This is, right on, Heidi. This is so great. This is so great. There was one person who just gently said something like, at the time that I was reading it, well, Heidi, I disagree with you on many points, but I'd love to have coffee with you about it.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like, let's break this down. And my approach to Facebook, I mean, I'm not a turtle. So I assume when somebody's posting something like that, an opinion piece, I assume it's put out there and that there's an openness to have a different opinion stated. So that's sort of like where I was taking it from.
Sure.
And because if you, my assumption is if you weren't interested in hearing from someone like me with my opinions, you wouldn't have shared it in an arena that I could read it in, right?
Right.
And yet it was a post that was directly, my opinion was aimed towards someone like me, because it was addressing the message from my side of the aisle that if you voted for Trump, you're in alignment with a hateful agenda. Mm-hmm. And so your piece being, I'm not a hater. So you don't have to tell that to people who agree with you. You have to tell that to people who don't agree with you. So here I was like, okay, obviously, so far I'm the only one who disagrees. And so so that's just a little bit about it, but to like uncover like my own shadow around that. I'm reflecting, aren't I? Is, I was in a place on that Wednesday after the election of just anger and despair and fear, a lot of fear,
What was the fear from?
Well, the fear was from, my major in college was international foreign policy. And I really believe that it takes a skillful hand and extreme restraint and judgment to be able to interact in a complicated international political arena. Mm-hmm. And none of these qualities did Trump display. And so when there are so many countries that have nuclear weapons now, and a lot of scary dictators making political gains, the fear was really from this place of, holy crap, this could be, the welcoming of World War III. Yeah. This is where I was coming from. Like, I wasn't really, and personally, I'm no longer in an age where I, personally have an investment in abortion rights, but I would support that from my younger women friends. And, it's like, what's personally speaking to me, it was just like that whole, like, lack of safety, and then also seeing this wave of hate just sort of like, become overwhelming. So I was in a place of fear. And so when I saw your post, it felt like my response and the amount of time that I spent on that response, in my frame of reference, given my headspace that day, that was a huge amount of love that I could muster, because I wasn't telling you to fuck off. I wasn't telling you that you were full of shit, and I'm using strong language right now, but this is the way I talk when I'm intense.
What you were saying.
And I And I didn't just summarily dismiss you too and go like, read it and go like, I'm out, I'm on to something else, or like,
right,
mute you or unsubscribe to you. Like, so it was something like I cared enough
yeah,
that I wanted to engage.
mm-hmm.
And I cared enough that I didn't want to engage from a place of, you're full of it.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was engaging in a way that was forcing me to be calm and responsible
Mm-hmm.
and loving. And, but I can totally get how your experience of that would be different. I mean, in my context, it felt loving and open-hearted because I had to really work to sit with what you said and then respond to it in a way that I felt like I was really reaching to speak to you with your language, which is like, okay, I know religion and Christianity is really important to you, so I'm gonna come at this from the angle of Christianity because I know that's important, more important to you than me just saying, well, don't you think that women should be able to do whatever they want with their body? Like, there's no, like, for me, I had that belief, but I wasn't going to come at you with that because it's like, I don't know that you connect to that. Right. So, yeah.
You were speaking to me in what you believed would be my language.
Yes.
To create that identification in some way.
Right.
Yeah.
But I totally can see how that despite all that, how it could be received differently.
Well, and here's the thing too. I think anytime we communicate on social media, apart from face and physical form and tone of voice, and maybe if you and I had been together and had that conversation that we had on Facebook, it would have been very, very different. But because it was it's so fragmented, you take it apart, it's disembodied, and you just have words on the page. And then I try to think in my head when I'm reading this, what is her voice sounding like when she's saying this? Because it sure sounds really hateful to me when I think of your voice saying those words, and I think of your face going,
yeah.
Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was. It sounds to me like your voice was, help me understand this. Like, this
right.
is me. How you can say you're not a hater when I don't see anything loving about this. And then your voice, now that we're talking, it sounds like it was a curious for you, but without your voice in your face, I didn't know that, and I couldn't hear that, so I saw it as an attack and heard it as an attack. But thank you for sharing with me what was going on under the surface for you, and I can see how, compared to all the very strong negative emotions you were feeling, that what you wrote was an effort to engage.
Right.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I'm just sitting here, there's just so many complicated layers to this because talking to you now about it is a different experience than had I called you up then and responded. And first of all, I wouldn't have called you up to talk to you about it because even though we've had a friendship for 30 years, it hasn't been maintained at the level where this kind of dialogue was possible.
Right.
So number one. And so the complicated issue is like, it would, the initial communication was messy in that it obviously didn't, like, my initial communication to you was messy in that it came across differently than I intended it. And there was also an energetic charge to it.
Yes.
Right. That you were picking up on. But despite the messiness, You showed a willingness to engage. I showed a willingness to engage back. And that was actually part of what, like a big part of what created the trust and the impetus to create this dialogue. Which, so I wanted to name that piece too, because I think there's a huge, like in this process, there's got to be a willingness to take a risk.
Yeah. Yes.
And a willingness to sit with discomfort.
Mm-hmm. And attention.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, you know, part of what we communicated since our last, in correspondence since our last telephone call is the importance of really being more transparent, like with the underlying shadow and judgment.
Yeah, right.
And that's been an interesting process.
It has been, because we want to, I know for me, I want to skip past all that hard stuff and just get to the hug.
Yeah. And I had that same experience too. And it was sort of like, wow, look at this. We interacted. She could hang with me because like I don't know, like in your model, what my communication style is, but it's sort of like I am an intense person, and the intensity is sometimes used as a tool to see if this person can handle me. And if they can stick with me despite my intensity, then I know I can trust them.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And it's not, yeah, I know. It's a very different style, isn't it? And so like the fact that you responded with, you know, with presence and care and kindness, I was like, okay, I'm in. You know, like she's
me was staying up until 1 a.m. that night, like pulling all my hair out saying, oh God, how do I respond to her? Help me. Because I'm just,
wow.
my great desire, my initial desire was to refute everything that you had refuted. But then I just realized it's not gonna get us anywhere, because
Right.
we could do that all day long. And like we've already talked about, we're not going to change each other's minds.
Right.
So what are we left with? Well, we're left with, I still want to be connected to you. Help me understand.
Right.
Understand this more. And yet at the same time, I think for us to both acknowledge the hurt and to feel what we need to feel is so important.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily want to stay there. I don't want to stay in that place of being angry about what you posted. I have to at some point let that go, but being honest enough to say that was really hurtful. Have you hear that and say, I can understand how that would be hurtful for you. Then that's healing for me. And then I can let it go.
Right.
Now, I know in some relationships, we don't get that. We don't have somebody that says, I hear you're hurt and understand how that could be hurtful for you.
Right.
And yet we still have to let it go, because otherwise it eats us alive.
Right. I mean, that, yes, it's much more soothing to the system when the other person is able to say, wow, I really hear your experience and I understand how you could have that experience. Because I think so much the reason why we push so hard is because we're just trying to get them to hear us and acknowledge the validity of our experience, right? Mm-hmm. So there is that. And then, yes, there's that other level of, okay, how do you show up for yourself in stating what your experience is, and then take the responsibility to equalize yourself regardless of how the other person receives it.
Right. Because that is your responsibility.
Right.
You can't expect the other person to help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to let it go. Yeah, I'm with you.
Right. And then what I was interested in exploring a little more is how our withheld judgments of someone actually interferes with connecting and how to move through those judgments, And it's tricky because, like, are you going to be transparent with somebody that you have just a passing relationship with?
Probably not, because
Right.
a whole lot to gain.
Right. So it's how are you transparent? Is it transparency with yourself and what you are judging about this other person? But the trick is like, why do I hold that judgment?
Yes.
What is that a result of that's going on in my system? Like the judgment around, like I shared, the anger and judgment I felt around you and other people voting for Trump came from a place of deep fear.
Sure.
And
work to find that too.
Right. Because I can put anger on other people, but I have to own my fear.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
And if we spend all our time blaming other people, we don't have to look at our fear because it's scary.
Right. Well, and we can even do like, you're making me afraid.
Right. If you were,
but it's easier to go to a place of, well, I could choose not to be afraid.
But for you to be able to say, here's what I was afraid of, I think that takes some introspection for sure. And I look at it too in terms of what I am and was afraid of. And I know when I first read your message, it was being afraid of looking stupid to all the people that were reading it. So it was my reputation or my intelligence or whatever it is, my image.
Your ego.
My ego, yes. Then it's also my fear of rejection because it felt like rejection by you. Even if it wasn't, it still felt like it. So it was my fear of rejection. It's my fear of failure too, though, because I had really put my heart out there and thought that I did a really good job of explaining my position. So to have you come back and refute it, then I felt like, oh, and now I've failed because the point that I was trying to make, that's not what she walked away with. Right. So you know what I mean? I think there's so many different layers of fear that go into this. And then if I want to jump out of that, then I judge you. Right. And then I'll say, well, she's this and this and this, and that's why she would write something like that to me instead of, man, I'm sensing this. This is what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, so a lot of layers of fear there on your experience too.
Yeah, both of us.
Yeah.
When you get two scared people arguing with each other, that's a bomb.
Right.
It just is, unless they are able to stop and talk about what they're afraid of.
Right.
Once you can talk about what you're afraid of and the stories behind what you're afraid of, then you can find that place of connection. But without that, you're going to be communicating out of your fear, which is a train wreck.
Right. It's tricky. I walked a friend through this because I've been seeing this very nugget at the heart of the issue of, judgment flying. And it was in response to a man who was from the Listening Project going to the Republican National Convention and just setting up a table and listening to people. And I think I shared about this earlier, about the woman who came up and said, I think women who have abortions should be jailed.
Right.
And then he asked her, well, how did you come to that belief? And she shared how she couldn't have a kid, and as a result her husband left her, and she was desperately lonely and so sad that she couldn't have a kid. And the man who was a progressive, interviewing her, got to a place of compassion and got out of anger. And I, as the reader, got to a place of compassion and out of anger. And I was sharing this with my friend, and she went to this place of, well, then why would she want to make it bad for everyone else? Why would she want to jail everyone else? And it was, I was like, what are you feeling right now? She's like, I'm afraid that someone like that would want to jail someone. And I was like, wow. And so it cycles on until someone is willing to just get out of fear and go, oh, I feel you. I may not agree with you, but I feel you. And, you know, let's just acknowledge that you're afraid. And how nurturing it is to the person on the receiving end of that, to experience just being held, you know, energetically, you know, literally, figuratively, whatever. So.
But it's risky because
it's
vulnerable.
It is.
And vulnerability is scary for us because we don't know how someone else will receive that. And to have it be received in a beautiful way like that is incredible. That's an incredible experience. I think it's when someone is vulnerable, like if I had written that email to you and told you what I was feeling and you had attacked me in return and said, well, that's stupid. Why would you think that? And of course not. I was writing from a heart-centered place. Don't you believe me? You know, if you had responded in that way, then I shut down little by little by little. And at some point, I don't share anything with you anymore because I don't trust you to receive it.
Right. And so the question is, what is the key to getting to a place where we're willing to hold space for people and hold space for ourselves?
Yeah.
You know, holding space meaning like, I'm like all of this anger and judgment I'm feeling is actually because I'm afraid. I mean, that's holding space. That's like giving myself space to realize what's going on at a deeper level.
Right.
And then from that place, then I'm more likely to be able to recognize that other people are actually in their fear, in their anger and scary actions are coming from a place of fear. And just holding consciousness for that bit of information, which activates our ability to be compassionate.
Yes, and empathetic.
Right. Right.
And that changes everything. So let's ask ourselves then, because in order to get to that place, I believe we have to have a purpose. Like I have to know that there's a purpose in holding space for you and in you holding space for me. So what do we want? Like, what are we doing this for?
Well, I have to start with what my personal motivation is. I think before you get to a joint motivation, you have to identify your own personal motivation. And for me, the head and heart space I was in the Wednesday after the election was so uncomfortable. It was on all levels of my psyche and even my body, a place that I could not bear to occupy. And so accessing that place, you know, that conversation that was sparked offline where I reached out to you and then your response, that was this spark of joy that ignited. And it motivated me to work as hard as I could and as hard as I can to expand my capacity to hold complexity and hold space for and understand. Holding space also means striving to understand the fear that we all carry and how to create situations to help people move through that so they can connect better, because that's the only way we're going to get through that. So that was my personal motivation to get out of my own discomfort, which then moved into a more global motivation. What about you?
So And I definitely feel resonance with you in what you've shared, because I want that as well, that ability to hold complexity and to find peace in the midst of the tension. So peace is a really big hot button for me. I think by nature, I'm a peacemaker. I've already said that I hate conflict. And I know that that's just part of the way that I'm wired. So I want to honor God by being a peacemaker. He said, blessed are the peacemakers. So I want to be a peacemaker. And I see so much division and conflict and unrest in our world. And I hate it. I hate it. And to find even little bitty pockets of peace, or to help create even little pockets of peace between people or between groups of people, oh my goodness, that just does so much for my soul, and seeing that it's possible. It really is possible. And then the other part of it is I did a personality test in the last year called the Enneagram, and it divides up your personality. You know, there's many different arms and wings to it and all of that. But my primary one is I'm a helper. So I'm driven to help. And you pair helper with peacemaker, it's all about what we're doing. And if my experiences and training and education and all that I've done in my past, if it has all now come to this, to where I'm being asked to help to create peace in some way or facilitate peace in some way, that's a great big vision. And that's a beautiful purpose. And I want to see that, and I want to experience it for myself. And I want to be a woman who learns how to facilitate peace well in my own relationships, but then in the relationships of the people around me too, where I see we struggle so much. Yeah.
It's like we've got similar motivations.
We do. That's right.
I have a thought, but it might, I don't know if we're running out of time, and if it might be a topic for another day, but it's like, because we did talk about withheld judgments that inhibit vulnerability with each other. And if it might be worth exploring, like the twisted judgments that are not overt, but more like assuming that the other person is judging. And that it's where we're not in a position of actually believing that we have judgments about the other person, but that we actually feel like the other person is judging us, and then we act accordingly. Because I think that shows up more in like friendships like ours, where we're not we're invested in that peace, holding that peace for each other and in the relationship, but it can serve to get in the way of being fully vulnerable. What do you think?
I definitely agree. And I think about even our last conversation. Remember where I said that I was backwards? Not I'm backwards.
Right.
Because there was a part of me that thought that you thought I was backwards, even though you've never given me any indication of that. You never said that.
Right.
I just assume that you think that I am, because I put you in this whole group of people on the other side of the fence that thinks that I am.
Right.
Even if you don't, I'm afraid of you judging me. And the longer I go, I've realized that in this last week, like the longer I go not being connected to you, the more I can blow that up.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Like the more I can put you in that box of people who judge me.
Right.
When I talk to you, that softens for some reason. And I am connecting with you, I believe, from a heart level. And then I don't put all of those yucky things on you that may not even be true.
Right. It's such a fascinating thing because I do that too. I like, it's not like I don't have this experience of like saying, well, Heidi's uptight or Heidi's this, like fill in the blank judgments, like Heidi's too religious or Heidi is, like I just don't have conscious overt judgments. But like if I look at the fact that I find myself believing that, over the years, like in our interactions on Facebook or whatever, that I'm too intense, or Heidi must think I'm a bad person because I'm not a Christian, or Heidi must think that I'm doing my child a disservice because I'm not raising her as a Christian, or Heidi must not believe the goodness of my heart, and my intention, like that is a really twisted way to have judgments about people. It's not like it's the ultimate in not taking responsibility for my own shadow, right? That I'm assuming that you're judging me, right, and then I'm going to defend myself accordingly, which is what's really happening, is that I'm judging you.
Right.
But it's coming out in this sort of like, I'm not going to take responsibility for it because it's probably just Heidi judging me.
So I'm judging you, thinking you're judging me.
Right.
Take responsibility for my judgment of your judgment.
Right. It's so sneaky.
It really is sneaky. And I think also we don't talk, like we don't even give space for the other person to talk about how they feel about us, because we're scared. I think we're afraid. Like, I'm afraid that I might actually hear that you do think I'm too religious. And then what would I do with that? Well, then can I be, like we've talked about in the past, can I be okay with you believing that I am? And can I give you the freedom to believe that? Well, I need to, because you are entitled to that opinion. Mm-hmm. But your opinion shouldn't keep me from being who I am. Like, if I decide, well, Kelly thinks I'm religious and I'm too religious, so I should just totally abandon my religion. Well, no, that's not right either, because I need to be who I am, but give you freedom to believe what you want to believe about who I am and have it not affect my identity.
Right.
Which is, I think, a very hard place to stand, because we want to change what other people think about us, or control it at least.
Right, so that we can feel safer or better. Yeah. Right. Because we're still giving people power to affect our experience.
Yeah.
And, if I go to the place of like, okay, you believe in a religion that tells you that I'm going to burn in hell because I don't believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God. Like holding, like, once upon a time, it was very hard for me to hold that, like, consciousness of like, wow, my religious friends and family pretty much assume that I'm going to hell. Wow. That, like, once upon a time, that made me very angry. But it's like, now where I sit, I don't actually care if you believe that. I sort of assume you believe it because that's what your doctrine teaches. But like, my belief systems are so removed from that paradigm that I can go like, it doesn't matter to me. I feel secure in like who I am, how I live my life, and the love that I feel in my heart. So.
And honestly, for me, I can give you the freedom to believe the way that you believe, and not try to control you or change that, because within my worldview, I have to trust God for that I'm not going to be the one to try to change your mind in this, because I don't believe it's rational argument or any of that is going to make a difference. That's just going to divide us more. So my job then is to ask curious questions and to listen and to let you be who you are, and then trust God with the rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like it's not like I don't have any energy in believing you're too religious, because what's important to me is that you're meeting me where I want to be met.
Yeah.
And I think I get caught up in judgments when I'm not getting my needs met. Judgments around other people when they are not doing what I need them to do or want them to do.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And here you are, a very religious person with very different conservative beliefs and, a whole different worldview on some levels, and then some levels, a very aligned worldview.
Yes.
And here you are stepping up and meeting me. I don't care about anything else
Well,
at
I
this.
tell you what, too, this is so interesting for me because typically, if I know that someone is liberal, and if I know that they don't believe the way that I believe, I'm not outspoken about what I believe. I'll usually
Interesting.
just wait for somebody to ask. And if they ask, then that's my invitation to share who I am. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm so afraid of conflict and rejection that it is very terrifying for me to tell you who I am.
Right.
But I've promised myself that in this process, and I've
Mm-hmm.
promised you that I will bring my whole self to the table, my whole heart to the table, because if both of us don't do that, this doesn't work.
Right.
If either of us choose to hide,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't work. And I've become convinced of that. And even as scary as it is, I must bring my whole self to the table and show you who I am,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't connect otherwise.
I agree. And it's that tricky razor's edge,
Yes.
because if I'm a little too much invested in the love of this relationship, then I'm going to err on the side of not bringing my full self in.
So
If I'm too invested in the fear, and yeah, the fear, if I'm too invested in the fear, then I'm going to err on the side of judgment
yeah,
and divisive behavior.
yes.
And so, how to hold that razor's edge of like feeling the love and aiming for the love, but staying true to oneself and one's needs,
Yes.
and
Right.
that's hard.
I heard a great quote. I need to look and see who said this, but it says that being listened to is so close to being loved that most people can't tell the difference.
Wow.
Isn't that good?
That's good. I'll have to think on that one.
Like, because being listened to, you and I listening to each other and hearing each other and reflecting back what we've heard the other say,
Mm-hmm.
it's that experience of being known, and to be
Right.
known is to be loved.
Right. Right. To be known for all of your foibles and vulnerabilities
And
and
loved anyway.
be accepted anyway.
Yeah.
What else is it?
What else is there? That's right.
Mhm. Thanks for the call today, dear.
Thank you. This was very good. Very
Yeah.
good. So much
I
to
look
think
forward
about
to that.
next week.
Yes, I look forward to it.
Me too. All right. Bye.